Hello and welcome to Baited Expectations. This is episode number 2. I'm piebypie and I am joined by the wonderful KittenCatNoodle, Brittleknee, and Velyna. Hello girls, how are we doing?
Doing good. How you doing?
Besides having an RSI and a bunch of technical issues, things are okay.
Yeah? I'm hearing health issues are going around. I feel bad for y'all.
Yeah, someone in my chat was like, RSI and PoE, name a more iconic couple.
Yep.
No.
Okay, let's start with Velyna. Oh no, I started with Velyna last time. Let's start with Brittleknee. What have you been up to lately? What build are you playing in Path of Exile?
I've been putting the final touches on my split arrow, explosive arrow, bleed mine build. Fawn, Awakener 8, Elder, Shaper, Uber Elder. And it's been like heaps of fun, and I'm really glad that there's a league like this where I could finally like put this build together and put it through the paces. Because I just don't think I would have been able to craft the gear otherwise. And next up, and I was gonna hopefully for today, but I'll have to wait until Monday. I'm hoping to revisit 2 previous builds that I put together and like kind of like go through an evaluation process on them to make sure they're up to par with what's available now. Because these were created before Legion and Timeless Jewels, and certainly before the most recent addition of the Keystones to the passive tree, the new Atlas changes with new Atlas bases, all that kind of stuff. So I need to kind of work with getting them up to par in what the PoE system is now. And I think the first one I'm going to start with is like my Soul Rest build, thinking of doing a mix of like phantasms with specters and pure cold conversion and lots of hatred scaling. So it should be pretty fun. And then if I can get time either before or after the bingo league, I'll probably try and brush up my Scourge Arrow Assassin.
Nice. That's a lot to do. Well, Noodle, RSI, how's that factoring in?
Yeah, it's definitely, I haven't really been able to play very much, which is a bummer because I finally crafted a lot of the gear for my Bleed Blind Gladiator. So I was playing around with the new item that gives you like extra damage with hits and ailments while you're blinded, and then blinding other enemies. And I finally crafted the Tailwind boots that I wanted and crafted a great axe for it. And now I can't really play that build, but I have another build that I cyclone around and it's minions, and I have been playing with a Wechat drawing tablet as a mouse because I can just kind of cyclone around with that. So that's, it's been kind of goofy, but it's been pretty fun. I just call it drawing my way to victory. But then besides that, while I was kind of waiting, just sitting around, I decided to make a video about Harbinger lore because of the new upgrades in Harvest. Initially, I was like, why is there upgraded Harbinger items? But then it's like, oh, because Harvest upgrades stuff. But there was new text, if you want to call it that, on these items. So, went full nerd, like deep delve, if you will, into that and have some conspiracy theories on what it would mean. So that's pretty fun, and it was pretty well received, and hopefully GGG will like say something, maybe.
Yeah, like you want that confirmation or that like, no, you went in the wrong direction, buddy.
Well, I'm hoping that it's talking about something that's going to happen soon, but we'll see.
Oh yeah, I listened to it right before the start of my stream, so I was like, I gotta double check because I started listening to it before and I was like, oh, that's really cool, okay. And then I finally caught up on it. I might say what I've been up to, and then I'll go to Vel, and then we can talk a little bit more about your video. So I've been playing what is it called? An EQ jug. I just was like, you know what? I've been disappointed by this chaos occultist enough. Now it is time to bonk, and the bonking was a good choice because it's fun. But I do find that with all the extra buttons and stuff for war cries and whatnot, it doesn't feel very smooth. So it definitely needs some work into like making it very streamlined feeling as much as I possibly can. And I guess one of the interesting debates is like, do you slam, like leap slam with it, or do you use dashes so it doesn't consume any of the, oh shit, I can't remember what it's called, but you know, the charges that you get from the seismic war cry. So that's something that I need to experiment with. And also, yeah, just like getting it a lot more experience. And yeah, I'm toying with Blade Blast Assassin if I get a chance to play another build this league. Also been playing a little bit of Ghost of Tsushima on the side.
Oh, do you like that?
No, but I want to. I want to desperately. I'm really bad at RPGs. So I'm like, I'm gonna play it on like the medium level because that's everybody's normal level, and I'm just like, you know what, Pi, you're not everybody. You're not gonna be good at this. You just need to accept that and play it on the easy level because that's how you are. Yeah. Anyways, Vel, what's been going on?
I have been delving. I was number 7 of all duelists in softcore for Delve, but I had a headache yesterday, so I did not stream, and now I'm 11.
No,
I have to regain. I have to regain my standing. That's it. I am a aura buffing, fort effect stacking, cycloning facebreaker boy, and the only thing that scares me is penetrate. So far, it's been really, really, really fun. So I'm having a blast. I don't want to stop playing this character. I'm gonna be so sad.
You were talking about that last episode, right? That
Yeah.
you were gonna make it. So it seems like it's working out pretty well.
but
I'm not
last
even
episode,
done making it. That's the worst part.
what?
I have to remake boots. I've spent 70 essences so far and have not gotten a single workable pair. Yeah. Yeah. That's breaking my bank. Yeah. And then until then, I can't get my final like layer of defense, so I'm just like we're still edging. Still a work in progress. But I mean, no, very little kills me. Only myself.
Okay. Well, we've all talked about what we're playing, and maybe we'll move on to some next topics. Let's have a little brief pit stop on races because there's a few coming up in the rest of this league. And I know that BK is really involved in the racing scene, so I figure she can probably weigh in on the different races that are coming up.
Absolutely. Earlier today, the second China race, points race kicked off. There was one last league, and this is the first one for this particular league. And there's a lot more of the Western client users participating this time around, so there's more people to watch that are participating in it, so that's good. For those who are out of the loop, it's a hardcore race with all of the monster mods turned on. And most of the players that are playing from outside of the area of China can expect anywhere for like 90 to 200 plus ping. So it's particularly brutal when coupled with the mods that you're up against. And details about who is streaming the event can be found in our PoE Community Racing Discord in the announcements section. And I'll try to make sure there's a link posted somewhere for anyone who's interested in joining that. You can keep up to date with any sort of races that are going on. In about 2 weeks from now, Zizaran is throwing a similar event called the Points Gauntlet Race with Vero as his organizer. They've raised an impressive prize pool through public outreach and fundraising. And this one will be on the Western client, so like our client, and will be open participation based on the slots that are available. I think they've crowdfunded all the way to 2,000, so that's cool. Lots of people can sign up. And more information about that race is also going to be found on the Discord. And then starting in September, there's 2 additional races that I'm personally involved in. Would have to be a bit hush-hush on those details because they're still in planning. But as far as coverage for the Points Gauntlet race, I'll be working with Ziggy D to do like news-style broadcasts of like what happens each day. So that should be pretty fun.
That's really cool because I know that the 24-hour costs were not really all that sustainable for you guys, especially when the Awakener race was happening earlier this year. But it's been what people have leaned towards because they're like, I'm not really sure how else to do this. So I'm really keen to see a different approach to content around the racing scene.
Yeah, we learned a lot of lessons from the Awakener race, both on the organizational side of things and from the casting side of things. And I think for these longer format races, the sort of new style casting stuff will probably be like the future.
I'm very
Probably like
excited.
maybe some sort of initial cast covering like the first day of progression or like the first 8 hours or so, but then after that, probably just nothing but newscasts.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely more sustainable for you guys. You don't have to have like rotations and shifts for the entire thing.
Yeah, it's actually very difficult to cast for 8 hours. It's very easy to stream for 8 hours because there's like that chat interaction, but when you are just trying to cast on content for 8 hours, it's pretty difficult. I don't think I could have gotten through the Awakener event if Camel hadn't been my co-caster. He really kept me going.
Yeah, I tuned into a few of those casts and I noticed that like because you seeing people just grind out the same kind of thing, there's not a lot of like dynamic changes that you would see in like a traditional esports cast. So that was definitely a thing for
Well,
me.
even then, if you like are focusing on one thing, something big could happen in 1 second on someone else. You're having to pay attention to so many different things, even if it seems like it's all similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes. Noodle, your lore video was a big success, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad. I was pretty lucky that there was a pretty decent amount of work that had already gone into figuring out what the Harbinger text meant beforehand. Even though I think they'd figured out most of the story, they hadn't really put it into context. So it's initially a story about like these harbingers imprisoned their god and then took his powers and went to Ray class. Like that's basically the whole story. But then I had a kind of glowy brain moment where I was like, wait, harbinger means announcing, like someone who announces the presence of someone else. And I was like, wait, Elder came like right after the harbingers, like the next expansion was Elder. And then looking at the new text and thinking that it might mean that Elder is now Cyrus, which is true, Cyrus, Cirrus. Thinking, okay, if the last story, if the last text were an announcement, what is this potentially announcing? Like, what could it mean? And I've definitely liked some of the interpretations. I kind of hope that it's not like the Harbingers and Cirrus team up together and they're like friends now. I'm hoping that it's more like, oh, he's a mortal being and we're going to steal his powers and there's going to be some new, consequences of that. But yeah, it was really fun. It was probably the nerdiest thing I've done in a really long time.
Yeah, Val, did you I know you watched it. Did you have any thoughts on it?
All I thought was I do not know how you remotely figured that out. Like, I'm so two-head that you even saying Harbingers announcing something, I'm like, oh, dur.
I had the same moment. I'm
so like, I was just amazed at the entire thing. I was so impressed because I'm like, I would never have put these things together at all. And I'm surprised. I'm not actually surprised, but I find it really interesting that Triple G just like threw this in there and was like, somebody's gonna figure it out eventually.
yeah, right. And then they're like, okay, here's 2 freebies, and then they figure it out, and no one did, and they're like, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah, this is fine. Whatever. It'll be appreciated eventually.
Yeah, it's like they figured out what a lot of the symbols meant, and what a lot of people did was they figured out, okay, this certain harbinger has these skills, so these must be kind of the general ideas. And then some of the symbols are pretty obvious. Like there's one that looks like an hourglass, so I was like, oh, it's probably time. Not quite big brain, or like, oh, there's a new symbol on this item and it's called, the yielding mortality, and it's only here, so maybe the new symbol is like yield or change. But I mean, it was really cool to figure out. I'm kind of annoyed that GGG, even when people in the past kind of figured it out, they're like, we're just not going to talk about that anymore. Like, who knows if you guys were right or if it has any meaning at all. A lot of people were saying, I don't think it means anything. Like, please let us know.
Or you go kind of meta with it. You're like, okay, well, if they're never going to if they're never willing to address it anyway, does it have any meaning because of that? Like,
oh my god, it's like if a tree falls in the woods. I know, it's like if I did all this work and I think I figured it out and they never say that I did I figure anything out?
No, now they're just gonna keep
such a tragic realization, and I really don't want to follow that thought.
It's okay. I'm already just like proud of myself for at least putting together a competent analysis and potential theory. And I've somewhat made peace with the fact that I'll probably never know unless, the next league or the next expansion is very explicit. And then if it is, I get to be like, I'm a genius. I am the best. But until then, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
So if one of the future leagues is like Harbinger 2.0, we expect you to bust through every wall and be like, I told you. Then fade mysteriously back into the darkness.
I will, absolutely. I want to be like a new endgame boss that just comes in and is like, I told you.
I picture like Noodle's doodle of herself, like animated, like busting through a wall.
Perfect.
I'm so here for it.
That's all I want, GGG. Come on.
Alrighty. Let's kind of. I was thinking about this before, and I had like a really nice way to like link, and now it's gone. So now I'm just gonna like ham fist my way to it. Let's talk about harvest.
Yeah.
All right. So we sort of touched on our impressions last week, but maybe we should recap them a little. Anybody got some real strong feelings? Want to go first?
Sure,
Only mold. Go ahead.
Harvest is something, I guess I can give like my overview and kind of like my opinion on it as it exists now, because it kind of touches on something that we were kind of thinking about talking about, but I guess I'll just go ahead and plow right through.
Do it.
Harvest is something I like and dislike in equal measure. It's a really strange headspace to be in, and sometimes even more difficult to explain without being sworn by the usual arguments that we've seen in like streamer chats and Reddit, the official forum, pretty much everywhere. I like harvest crafting. I think at this time it's too powerful, and I think a slightly more streamlined like crafting system is both the answer to the design intent that rares are like the most powerful items for most builds, sans like certain, unique sets play a specific role in character defenses or otherwise. But then it also plays along with like the design intent of the idea of item culling, that they're going to be reducing the amount of items that we got, therefore having a crafting system to then build upon these like bases that we're going to be trying to find. I think this is a good idea and a good direction. I don't really have an answer for how it should be implemented moving past this league and the availability and the ease of access of that implementation. But I'd like the system to be more accessible, but I also want perfect items to still carry a hefty time, knowledge, and currency investment. And I say this knowing full and well that items on this scale are going to be beyond my personal reach, whether, from this league onwards. I just don't craft mirror tier items ever. And I think that is healthy for the game, not only from an economic standpoint, but then also for providing content to a variety of different players of different skill levels, time investments, etc. The part I don't like about harvest crafting is the argument that I've seen time and time again that it is necessary for game balance. Because I think the items of this respective power is about the worst answer for game balance that could be proposed. And I know this is going to be really unpopular. But items should be something that you invest in to enhance builds and to push their power into the deep end, not make any baseline skill gem viable. I think that most of that scaling should come from the skill gem itself, the passive tree, ascendancy, cluster jewel, and these things should have the appropriate balance given to then elevate the things that are lagging behind right now. The weight of the game's mechanics, from the offensive damage that we do to the defensive layers and the sort of mechanics that we employ to survive the incoming damage, should not require gear of this magnitude to finally in like italics and bold, be able to use certain skill gems in the end game or to simply survive it all. And I know this crafting system has been a big boon, particular to both hardcore and solo self-found hardcore, so I'm probably pissing a lot of people off even further. But I think cleaning up the way that we take damage by consolidating mob buffs and making their affixes easier to discern and see effects, and calibrating certain calculations to avoid a lot of the one-shots like they've done for particular mobs in certain leagues, is needed on a much wider scale. I'm not saying make the game easier by culling the opportunities for intense damage spikes. I'm saying make the game more readable and concise. And some of the deadliest mob affixes out there have no visual indicator at all. Like powerful crits is like the silent killer.
Mm.
So I think more focusing on that, if we can just kind of pull off of this rabid intent that you need this gear in order to survive and look at the problem that's causing it, I think is the healthier long-term system for PoE. I mean, of course, being Oprah and you get mirror tier gear and you get mirror tier, everybody gets mirror tier gear is certainly an easy fix and certainly less interest system dependent, but it's just not the future I want to see for PoE.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because it seems like you can make really any character be beyond viable with these new crafts for little to no investment. So even if you have an not min-max necessarily, but even just a terrible skill tree, if you put a weird amalgamation of gems together and you don't have a lot of thought in that, still have this opportunity to have an insanely buffed character because of the easy access to this gear. That not only kind of, I agree, I don't think that should be the way to make characters viable that don't necessarily, that shouldn't be viable without that gear. But also, once this is taken away, what is the lesson here? That now you have to chase gear instead of trying to have a better build without this insane, difficult, unrealistic gear.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the amount of build creativity that we've seen in this patch. Like one example is the build that I've spent weeks on now. Is something that I would never hope to craft in a normal league, but it's something that I put together in PoB and thought it was really neat and wanted to play it sometime. So I like the idea of having that sort of build creativity be open to us. I just don't think that it should be through this.
I feel
it shouldn't be this easy. I feel it shouldn't be this easy. If you're gonna make some dependent on mods kind of gear, like my delve build is dependent on very specific mods on my gear. If it was any other league, this gear would cost mirrors, just stupid money. But now it's just I made it all in couple. It took me 2 weeks, but regardless, I made it all really easy. It was good. It wasn't the stress that I thought it would be. But I know that I'm never gonna play this build. There's no way I could ever play this build again. And I don't think that there's any way that they could implement harvest to still make it viable without spending.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? Is that it's fun for people who recognize this is not a sustainable thing that could be introduced. But I kind of wonder for people who are just learning about crafting and using these tools to make a build viable, what's going to happen to them when this is taken away? What's going to be their understanding of how to make a build work when they just have access to these insane items that could make the most epic trash pile be viable?
I've looked at go ahead.
I looked at sort of a bunch of different things about that, because I was thinking if you consider that items account for and I pulled this number from someone else saying it, so I can't be quoted. 80% of your damage comes from your item, and if you make a broken item, then you don't, like as Noodle and BK were saying, like you don't need to worry about the rest of your stuff being good or even competent. Like it just needs to be functioning, like there, and that's sort of like it's counterintuitive because you do want to introduce new players to an ability to craft, and I was originally saying like Harvest is really good at like showing you exactly what crafts will achieve what, and then starting to have people associating that with the even the imagery of the currency items. I know that wasn't like part of the original patch, but you know, like now you can, if you've never used currency before, look at the text of the craft and then like look at the item, the object that you can use to achieve that, and then understand cognitively that if you did that, you had the opportunity of having this. Not necessarily guaranteed, you know. But it's at the expense of people not having to engage with other parts of the game, not having to engage with the skill tree, not having to engage with design features, like just even linking your skill gems correctly or understanding like how support gems work, etc. That's a very concerning thing. Although, I mean, I guess there's probably someone in chat saying right now like slippery slope. You guys sound like slippery slopers, and I normally hate slippery slope people, but I feel like this is the wrong direction for the game.
But I feel like we've also seen like this problem manifested in two different ways over the past two leagues. Because with the Herald Stackers too, we saw like the return of Winter Orb, you know, the skill that had been dumpstered for a long time, but you put it on a Herald build and suddenly it's fantastic. And so we saw like the sort of like the end result of these really insane cluster jewels being added to the game that scale power in ways that they didn't anticipate, and kind of it got, you know, run away with to a point where the power of that build was just absolutely insane, and the surviving remnants of it are also pretty good too. But then we've seen it on the other side. So like we saw it on the passive tree side on it last league, and this time we're seeing it on the gear side. But in either implementation is wrong. I think that there needs to be a balance where, you know, there's a baseline entry with skill gems being balanced more, and then having good access to damage on the passive tree through just the passive tree itself, new keystones, clusters, but then augmented further with the gear that you can craft. And I like harvest crafting. I like the pseudo deterministic parts of it too. I think that's really interesting because if you want certain outcomes, it's very nice to be able to like hit close to it. Yes, you can aug and remove for specific outcomes, but I don't think that targeted will survive. But I'm definitely for a I don't know, a crafting system that has more weighting towards something that you're trying to get out of it.
I think in general, every time we have buffs and nerfs or new things introduced, GGG tends to have sort of a like pendulum effect of, you know, something's good, let's make it completely unusable, and vice versa. I mean, we saw it with Elemental Hit becoming like really great, and then they took that away. And same with trap support, which honestly I don't understand why when Arc Traps was a thing, they were like, trap support is the problem. Like, I mean, but it's interesting to think about how this is supposed to be introducing a new type of crafting in PoE 2, right? I think they alluded to the fact that this was something that they were thinking about, and I agree that I don't think the completely deterministic, like remove and augment, could be. I think that's a little too powerful, and we talked about that before. But I wonder, like, if they are going to take some elements of harvest crafting for PoE 2 or just for the future, like what would you think would be a balanced thing to take, if anything?
I guess that depends on, I mean, there's so many features to harvest. So like you've got the garden, which we haven't even gotten into yet. And then you've got how the crafting works, which is highly informed by the garden. And I wonder, you know, like, I guess maybe I'll bring it up now, that the minigame like every time PoE introduces a mini game, they always scrap it, like every single time. Except for Delve. Delve is like one of the only times that they've kept it. Every other mini game doesn't exist anymore, like Synthesis and all them. I guess, you know, Blight, it's not really a mini game, is it? Like, it is just a tower defense mechanism, and most people don't really engage with the tower thing all that much. They just need a powerful enough character, especially this league. But yeah, like, you've got the garden, and then you've got the actual crafting, and then you've got, you know, Oshabi boss fights and stuff, and that's sort of more tied to the garden than the crafting, and the crafting is just this thing that came along for the ride. But then trying to picture how the crafting will look without life force being the limiter on it, and harvest benches being a way to save things, which, you know, entirely the design thing didn't start it. Like, it started out with them thinking you'll only have like 1 or 2 benches and like 3 to 6 crafts save, not quad tabs full of them. Like, all of it sort of just went the whole, they grossly underestimated the player base. And
how we feel we constantly need that craft. I need that craft. I might need that craft though later. I could use that maybe. I need that.
I don't need it now, but I might.
I've never used the attack one yet, but I have 20 of them. I might need them.
Yeah, doing like 40 chests, trying to plan out what crafts you're gonna need for 3 builds in the future.
Yeah. I literally have 10 fractures. I haven't used a single one. I don't think I ever will, but I need all those fractures.
And that's not even to mention like selling them as a, you know, new currency type thing. Like they thought we'd be selling seeds, not selling the crafts that came from the seeds that we put in harder crafting stations that we have shit tons of.
Yeah, that someone made us pay literally to sell those instead, and that's what everyone does.
I'm actually kind of stressed out by the amount of hoarder crafting stations I have at this point. I'm like, what am I going to do with these? Are they just going to come back to standard and live there forever? Yes, the answer is yes, they will. Okay. And I kind of can't deal with that.
Put them next to all the bestiary nets.
I'm like, but then I can't get rid of them because look at all those good crafts. Look at, they're so good. It's a vicious cycle, man. Oh my God. And the amount of time I spend in the garden, feel like I'm 5-heading everything, but it's all 2-head all the time. Like, I don't understand. I do. I'm like, oh, I should keep, what if I just grab this station over? And then I'm like, I'm in there for 15 minutes. It's too much.
You forgot what the mods are on your map, and you're like, oh God, I've gone out. Did I kill anything?
I'm in the map.
What year is it?
Started. Yeah. Yeah.
You emerge from the cave, staggering into the light, like.
Yeah, I feel like galaxy braiding all the time, and I leave exhausted. Like, I'm done with this.
Actually, the fatigue is such a under-discussed element. Do you guys have the fatigue too?
Of what?
Like, does it tire you? This the garden thing, like
being in there so long.
Yeah, the crafting, the figuring out all the seeds and all that whatnot. Like, does it cause fatigue? I wonder.
Well, this kind of made me stop, but I did almost have a panic attack when I lost track of my augment crit horticrafting station because I had switched 2 of them, and so I had probably about 20 to 25 stations around the garden because I just had been using them sparingly, and I was like, where did it go? Just running back and forth. I had to like pick them all up and put them in a tab and like search for it, and I found it. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would say that I'm pretty like neutral on the league. Like, I don't feel fatigued. I have been kind of forced to stop, so that might be part of it. But because I like to make meme builds, I'm very casually approaching crafting, more so than like really caring about it or like not wanting to do it at all. So I've been very kind of neutral. Actually, like BK said, I have things I love and I have things I don't care for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm project oriented, so this has been a great league for me personally. You know, regardless of how I feel about it, I don't feel fatigued at all. Like, there's always something to work on, which is nice. Even if, like, maybe your character isn't progressing the way you want to, but you can get one craft closer to that end goal. And that's pretty nice.
Somebody in my chat mentioned something really interesting is what if they took harvest and made it like a 10% chance to find a Oshabi, and then there was just random seeds planted, like ringe seeds that you get to use. And I think that might be like the best compromise that I've heard yet of how to keep the garden in the game, but without us going crazy with it.
So,
That's
like,
definitely
how would that work for higher tier seeds? Would it all
Just
be like
randomly get them in high tier maps, I suppose.
Huh.
Just a chance for them to be planted if you find her in a map. And that was
Interesting.
like, yeah, that would I feel like that's really might be the only actual
Yeah, it's
solution.
or like bestiary scaling too, like where you can only find the boss mobs in certain red tier maps or tiered maps in general, like where the tiger is like the hardest one to find and is in whatever tier and above maps, etc. Like scaling the seed tiers by respective difficulty and then having it be random. I guess at that point in time is like, would you still be able to save things? And then how would you access it?
True. I guess she'd have to go into your hideout like
I mean, I think like not being able to save it just creates that sort of like anxiety where you're gonna have just like stash tabs of things that are like almost good enough until you find that one perfect garden. And you're like, yes, this is my moment.
I'm gonna make 2 whole exalts. I've been carrying it for 2 months, but I'm gonna make 2 exalt boxes.
I mean, quad tab sales would go up for sure.
Yep.
Maybe that's the strategy.
Um,
Like my perfect implementation of like the crafting stuff actually wouldn't include the garden at all. I'm not particularly enamored with the mechanic, I have to say. As much as I like Factorio, I'm just not a big fan of the garden.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it a lot to begin with because I liked thinking about it. It's a weird situation to be in, but like I really liked the idea of trying to figure out how to use all the different machinery and the requirements of the different tiers and whatnot. Like it was a very interesting puzzle, and I quite like thinking about puzzles that way. But PoE is already like 700 other puzzles that I gotta think about, and that's like a very different kind of puzzle. So I mean, it's fine to begin with. There's like an introduced puzzle, like, you know, ta-da, new puzzle, new Rubik's Cube type thing. Like, have a go at that. And now I'm meh about that, which makes me feel meh about the rest of it, which is...
The biggest problem is that in things like Factorio, you have the ability to create self-sustaining systems with that, like have certain feedback loops that then like perpetuate other parts of the entire thing. And we don't really have that flow to it. Like there's no point where you hit critical mass where you can then like perpetually sustain certain farming things. Like you either get bottlenecked in certain tier 1 seeds, you have to go buy them, or you have to commit to just juicing, never looking for tier 1 crafts, etc. Like there's all these, and flowers do a very good job at kind of solving this problem, but they're not quite common enough to really create those same sort of like automated systems that exist in games like Factorio that it's trying to mimic, that are kind of like the more satisfying part of being like, look, I built this.
I forget if we talked about this a little bit last time, but we had kind of discussed if they could make a new currency instead, because I agree with BK. Don't really want to see the garden anymore or a shop. Let's be real. But
She's so
if
pretty
they could
though.
have some
it is pretty.
She's night off knockoff.
like
Sorry.
her.
Wow. Tell us how
Sorry.
you really feel.
BK got the claws out. But to have some kind of new currency based on the seeds, where probably not the fully deterministic rolls, but things sort of similar to an essence, but instead of re-rolling the whole item, it's re-rolling one mod tag on an item. and having some sort of tier with that. I don't know how they do some of the other crafts that are, you know, like getting stuff for your map device or, you know, making winged scarabs or anything like that. But I think for crafting, they could figure out a way to have, like, even if it's tiers of seeds for the specific thing you're re-rolling on an item. I don't know. I think that would be possible and it wouldn't be too OP, but I don't know how they do it because, yeah, you have to plant the seeds and grow the seeds right now. It couldn't be like a one-to-one situation.
Yeah.
I think it can be solved by fossils and bestiary. Like we touched upon it last time, but I really think it could because they're tied to certain beasts anyway. So you take those beasts and you put them in the world for bestiary outcomes, and then for the deterministic outcomes on certain things like roll this resonator, but have a type of fossil implemented that acts as the reforge one, where it's like you will be guaranteed, you know, like a fizz roll on the item, and then you can still augment it because there's already a fossil that has high tier mod outcomes. So like
Wait.
it would just
Was your suggestion a third type of resonator that was just a
no, just like another type of fossil because it needs to have a like an air of self limitation too. So the resonators are perfect for that because resonators can only have 1, 2, 3, or 4 sockets. So by socketing the fossil for deterministic, you limit what you can also block. So it is powerful, but it also, you know, like will kind of like muddy or mod pool slightly too.
Yeah.
So there's you know, like you're going to probably get that, but the rest of it might not be good. You might have to take a couple of annuls and then multi-mod from there. But like I feel like the two systems with like the more deterministic stuff being introduced through a new fossil and then having some of the other outcomes that are like keep your suffixes, reroll your prefixes. I mean, like you can just attach that to the type of beast it already comes from in the garden and then just throw it into the world and send Einar after it. He'll be happy. Einar loves hunting.
Yes.
I just wanted to like go on that because yeah, I agree. Fossils already sort of act like the reforge with a guaranteed, but they're actually technically better in some ways because you also have a no or less of these type of mods in addition. But for the more deterministic, are you saying they could do something like place that in bestiary, put those beasties in the menagerie where they belong?
For like the guaranteeing certain rules that would be like implemented in the form of a new fossil, where some of like the add influence, remove influence, reroll prefixes, sort of those that already exist in the bestiary like realm of things. Like we have the suffix to prefix beasts and create like certain unique items and all that other kind of stuff. Like there's already beasts that correlate to what's in bestiary, and then the reforges and rerolls can come through the implementation of a new type of fossil that when socketed would then, you know, have a high prevalence to the other things that are socketed in it. So it makes those things more deterministic and powerful. So like in a 2-socket resonator with like jagged, you would have a lot of fizz outcomes.
Like an enhanced.
Right. Mm-hmm. So like we
Okay.
wouldn't have the aug remove system, but just something that makes things more prevalent.
I almost feel like it wouldn't be. Yeah, so I listen and I feel like it would almost work better as a resonator than it would be as a fossil, because fossils are the things that engage with the tags, right? Whereas the resonator is sort of more like the thing that makes it a currency. And like you've got two types of resonators now, one that goes normal to rare and the other one that rerolls rares. It's almost the nature of how the tag is being engaged with that could be done with a resonator. Because you're trying to like annul or exalt, right? So you'd need like a third type of resonator that would fit that, right? Or am I going in a different direction here?
I
don't think the augs and annuls should be that precise, but that's just me.
No,
Yeah.
I think there should be like annul off a resistance. And then you just hope that you get the one that you know, maybe you want all of them gone, and that's good. You know, my only concern is that if we do it, if that any of that happens, then I feel multi-mod's just going to become king again. You know, I actually realized I used it so little this league for the first time ever because there was no need really, right? In comparison. So that's like which people had a problem with before multi-mod being like the end all be all kind of thing, because it was very good. But I like the idea of if they made it a resonator, but I don't think Triple G has ever taken something from another league and then rolled its thing into an old league.
Yeah.
Right? So that
I've
would
had
be
retroactive.
very
That's why,
different.
like my idea is a shot in the dark, to be completely honest. I think the garden is here to stay, but
I like it though. I like
that's
the idea a lot.
Pretty quickly, but alas.
I mean, for sure, let's theorycraft while we can before it's reality. Yeah, that's one of the things, like, sometimes I feel like they introduce new features to the game with a whole stack of lore on top of it and theming and stuff that makes it Path of Exile, but it's new Path of Exile content. And underneath it is a bunch of mechanics that you can use and engage with. But because they get this, like, they get so stuck in the whole, it has the lore flavor on top. We can't separate it from the lore flavor or rewrite history, but then at the same time, the game is always having to come back to that day zero thing. So you can retcon shit. Like they have retconned the previous, endgame bosses by introducing further bosses. Like there is retcon in Path of Exile, but it seems to not exist when it comes to challenge leagues.
What, like Delirium and Cluster Jewels? And how that's apparently a league mechanic?
I'm sorry, is that my rant or yours?
I mean, I just think I completely agree, because even though obviously I like lore and I think that it's great that they try to connect everything into the wider world, even if it's by the tiniest little, technical string, like Tang Maz. Oh, we mentioned him before, so now it's lore. Like, I don't think that we should have mechanics be necessarily completely married to the league. I think it sort of gives them stuck so that they have to keep stacking new things and introducing things instead of merging anything or expanding on anything that they've done, because it's like, well, it's that. It belongs to that league. Like, that's how it is now.
Yeah.
You just have to do new stuff.
Then you have all this bloat that we keep talking about, and then can you really cycle out irrelevant leagues? It's going to have seriously dire consequences because everything is linked and relying on different leagues.
And it still all exists in standard.
Yeah.
They've only ever done like 2 wipes, I think, like 2 full wipes that I know of. So, and yeah, it's all in there, right? What if they change something or add a new mechanic to an old league mechanic, and all of a sudden the essences in standard just get like stupid, or like it breaks a bunch of other code that they've already had in there, right? So I get why, like, this is a tricky one, but as it stands now, yeah, I'd rather see the garden gone altogether than have its current implementation go into like
I think that's guaranteed though. That's been pretty much guaranteed by Chris at the last Bay class, right?
Well, I'm just so curious how they're going to implement it. I can't see the way. I need to see the way, and I cannot.
Yeah. To be a fly on the wall right now would be amazing.
Hey, anybody from Triple G in here want to tell us what you're doing? Want to tell us, please? Please, I'm desperate.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this announcement, and like we know when the new league, well, we know roughly when the new league is going to be announced, and it's like, ooh, I wonder if they're going to tell us before or after that. Like, definitely saw discussions around like whether that would be a sucker punch sandwich, sort of like a a nice news first or a nice news second type thing. You guys think it will be first or second?
You start with a compliment, then you give your criticism, and then you finish it up with but you're doing great, champ. Keep that.
I think they'll probably announce what the new league is first, because they've kind of already perhaps accidentally, perhaps intentionally given hype, being like, ooh, we can't even tell you the name because we just know what it is and be so excited. So I think they'll probably, especially since I think it'll be divisive no matter what they do, there's going to be some people who really want this to stay, and there's going to be some people who are like, get it out of my sight. They'll probably announce the league and I'd be like, by the way, this is what we're doing with Harvest.
Yeah. I tend to agree. Did we want to talk about the Oshabi fight? Has anyone done it?
Yeah, I did it. I did it on my bleed character, which was probably a bad idea because I had to kind of get up in her face, and she has really dangerous fizz damage projectiles that I like to go into boss fights blind because I'm a bit of a masochist. I just think it's more fun that way. You know,
let's
software
revisit the I just like to suffer mantra.
Yeah, I just like to suffer. But I think it's more fun because even though, you know, I obviously could be more prepared, I want to be excited by the fight. And I was very happy that it was not monochrome. It was great to have a boss fight that wasn't just one color, because that makes me question if I'm colorblind or not. But it was very anticlimactic in that she just kind of teleports around. There's some blobs and she shoots projectiles. I was hoping for some kind of epic transformation, but it was all dark.
Yeah.
So if there was one, I couldn't see it. And then I died. So.
You can't tease that they're druid models and then not have a shape-shifting boss.
Right. I was expecting a huge, like, oh, I'm part of the life force and now I'm a giant plant or something. I don't know. But she just like sits in a circle and like rotates and like shoots you full projectiles and then teleports somewhere. I don't know.
She is.
Didn't think much of it.
She's not remotely like. She's meh because all you gotta do is run circles. That's it. You just gotta run circles. The only thing it's annoying if you're melee because running circles is harder, right? It's a little more annoying. Yeah, it's slower and it's definitely, and she has killed me mainly because I stopped running circles, but I literally followed, I'm just gonna run a circle and it works. Like I didn't even get hit. I managed to get all of her challenges out of the way on my second attempt just because I just ran in a circle again and again. I was like, I mean, Cirrus took a while to get all his challenges done, and I paid for one Cirrus challenge. It was too hard. They asked too much of me. It was too hard. I couldn't do it. All right. I'm not the most graceful, you know. I mainly just go directly into his beam and fail every time. So yeah. But this one is like a circle. That's it. So it was the T4 seeds, on the other hand, though, they do not mess around. Okay.
That's part of
they
why
are.
I'm disappointed because they're fun.
Yeah.
I like them. I especially like the yellow one. I think it's very interesting, and it's terrible when it hits you with the vines, the like poison vine things, and then the circle. And you're like, do I go
the degen? With the degen, right? The D.
But it was fun. It was colorful and it was interesting, and there was shifting forms. Hint, Oshabi, what are you doing?
Yeah. They even made her look like a night elf knockoff, which, you know, has the druid class. Like, why weren't they shifting? Like, why?
I'm also kind of mad because I had a theory that she worships. So it was confirmed she worships spirit, which is also what Nina worships, and I was excited about that. But I had a theory on that theory that the spirit is actually another Asmiri god that's like vaguely mentioned in one flavor text. It's like the earth god. So just seeing her be like, oh, you know, become one with the grove and doesn't change at all, I was like, fine.
One with the grove and nothing happened.
Also, can they give her more voice lines?
That's not the first time that we've had an NPC or like a league character introduced who doesn't have enough voice lines.
But I will say the tier 4 fights make up for it. I was disappointed by her fight, and I don't know if there's like any real chase items that she drops. I haven't really heard much about them, so I'm assuming that there's nothing too crazy, but the tier 4 fights are really fun. It's just a bummer that Curse is kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
It's really just chase flowers, right? Like, I just need those flowers. Give me them white flowers, please, and the greens, and I guess I'll take some pinks too, but really white and greens. I'm always running out. And I feel very wasteful using them on T1 seeds, but I think T1 seeds are some of the best seeds, so.
Yeah, a lot of the good crafts are on T1s more than anything else, right?
Yeah, I just feel like,
for item crafting. Like a lot of the other ones are more like for your map device or for your fragment things. So
I feel those ones should be T1, and then like the really sexy annuls and things like that, like that should be T4s or something like that. I mean, even the fractures I feel should be, now they're good, but I still think they should be like T3. Can we, like, I don't know about you guys, but I've literally only needed and barely needed to synth one thing, because influences turn out they're just generally better than synth.
As soon as I found out you couldn't put it on an influenced item, I was like, oh.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna use it.
It's kind of funny because last league was all about, you know, like we're revamping res, and the thing that's going to matter is the bases, and that's really carrying forward. And I guess, like, on the one hand, I'm glad that that's still significant, but on the other hand, I kind of wish that synthesis was felt a bit better, maybe.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like it's just not really like there are a few odd cases. Like, I've seen some really nice bows on the subreddit, nice, really great bows, and the odd juicy, mainly weapons. Honestly, mainly weapons more than anything else. But like, they're just not worth it. If you can double influence something and then guarantee some really good double influence crafts, like. I just can't see one implicit beating that, or like 3 implicits, you know. Okay, the exploding implicit's really good, but other than
that. Okay. What do we think about I don't know. We could talk about the parent genres of like synthesis and blight and harvest and how the UI systems work. And does that, anybody got any thoughts on that? Like,
let me just tell you that just recently I had a blight whose tower still didn't work. Just decided to not work at all. Just cause I also had a blight that the portal was directly inside of a statue, and I couldn't kill any of the mobs, so the blight would never end. They were just stuck there, and I was stuck there, and I'm like, I guess I just have to leave you now, and anything you had that was good, you know. So blight, it's better now, but I still have my problem.
Yeah,
I still have my problems. I have to say though, the blight, I know people mauled about the blight tab, but guys, anointing your stuff in the blight tab is so good. I have to anoint a ton of necklaces, and I've already done like 14 necklaces, and it's just so much easier other than running over to what's her face with a bunch of oils and stuff. Just it's nice. That I like that quality of life. I know people mauled about it, but I personally, like, now that I've used it quite a bit, I'm like, yeah, okay, this is all right.
I've been seeing screenshots in the subreddit of people who was like, this is my blight tab, and then there's like 3 more quad tabs of like blighted maps, and I was like, dude, how are you producing those?
Sell some at some point, man. Like, sell it.
He's like, oh, I give them to my guildmates, and then I saw a comment in the thread. It was like, can I be your friend?
Can I be in your guild? Hello?
Yeah.
You recruiting?
Yep. If only.
As far as these like baseline systems are concerned, like regardless of how they ended up implemented and regardless of how their outcomes were, I'm personally glad that GGG continues to have these sort of like experimentations. I know sometimes they're vastly unpopular or very divisive with the player base as a whole, but like games grow when they start to assimilate things from other successful game genres. And I applaud their sort of like continued exploration of bringing some of these other aspects of other games that are very popular in their own right into the game. Like, certainly not all the implementations are good ones. Most of the UIs end up a bit fiddly, but it's still producing content that's, I don't know, like, part of it all becomes part of the base game. Like, you need your oils for your anoints and all these other kind of things, so you have to interact with them. And so for better or for worse, they're here to stay, but I don't know. I like the idea of seeing, like, other games in action RPGs. Like, I don't think a good action RPG should only be hack, smash, kill mini monster, rah. Like, I kind of like having these other little subsystems and things to do.
I love them doing this experimenting stuff. I mean, like I said, I really enjoyed the puzzle for what it was. Well, it was a puzzle. Who was going to jump in next?
I mean, I definitely agree that I think the experimentation and adding new things and trying new things, obviously there's the potential for people to not like it, but I think it's super important. And I think that a lot of the times it's more fun than I expect. I mean, like with Blight, I was like, I really don't like tower defense games. Like, I know I don't like that kind of game, but I still enjoy it. Honestly, I think the rewards that they decided to have related to that, and now some of the fixes with like proximity shields, which was an issue when the league was actually happening, like it introduces you to things that you might not have thought that you enjoyed. And I actually find that a lot of the times the amount of work that they put into new UI for each league is insanely impressive. Like, they are not only implementing new items and rewards and the whole mechanic of the league, but there will be, new areas with NPCs with certain types of stash tabs, with certain integrations with other existing items. And it's just really honestly impressive, the amount of things that they add, and then also just like how many things they've tried. I think that that's really like spectacular, that they're willing to put themselves out there and to try to branch out, if you will, Exile, with things like that. Sorry, terrible casting joke.
It was good. It was good. Question though. What did they do to proximity shields? Because let me just say, the root of all of my path mold is allies cannot die and proximity shields. Okay.
Oh,
and when they overlap.
When Blight first came out, they could overlap. So basically, if there was two monsters who had proximity shields next to each other, like, it would basically, for one, there would be monsters that had like allies have proximity shields, so it would spread like a freaking plague down the entire like Blight brand of my
that makes so much sense.
And so then you'd be trying to kill one, but they're like spreading it, so you're stuck there trying to get rid of this whole group, and something's happening. Especially, it was worst in Blight, like the actual maps, blighted maps, but like, I remember I was playing a minion build, trying to kill this thing with a proximity shield. There were so many monsters spawning and getting that proximity shield that my game like completely just lagged until it crashed. It was just like this whole group, and I was trying to calculate, who's getting hit, who's not. There's stuff spawning. It was really
they just made like these massive Venn diagrams of ultimate frustration, overlapping areas of fuck you, basically.
Also,
allies get. Oh god!
When we got 3.9 with the war banners, it was like the holy trifecta, or the unholy trifecta, rather. Oh god, overlapping war banners was a nightmare.
I did not remember the chain, but that makes a lot of sense of why I saw a lot of proximity shields in that league. I just assumed that Blight mobs loved it. Blight mobs love this one simple trick, proximity shields. Pretty much.
Yeah, I think it was the quality of like the uniques. They could have like proximity shield, but also allies have proximity shield, and so it was just like it became so messy.
Oh my lord.
Oh man, honestly, Blight. I feel like Blight period should not have allies cannot die or proximity shields. I feel they get enough things that those two things make them so, and then getting shotgunned from across the room by a bunch of goats. I guess I don't know. I'm still mad about it.
Fire beds.
Yeah. Yes.
Fire beds are bullshit.
It's like it's like you're doing, the Vol Cyclone, so you can't even, and they're just shooting you, and you're not sucking them in because they're stuck behind some little piece of environment, and eventually you die.
Stuck behind a pebble.
Eventually, yeah, like a nothing pebble at that. And you're trying to suck them in, but there's some allies cannot die guy who's all the way back there who's just keeping them just enough
He's
inside
like,
his buff. Yeah. Yeah. So, oh my god, yeah. I don't think that should be a blight thing, and I don't think it should be a garden thing either. I don't think that T3 the snakes.
Yes,
The
the
snakes
crit
shouldn't have
snake.
it. The snakes, they don't move, so they shouldn't have it. They barely move. They move a little, but not anything. Just a bit. Fine.
Oh, it's fine.
Oh man.
It's definitely like a thing because it's funny. The melee
Also,
characters.
performance. Go ahead.
I was gonna say.
I was just saying performance. Go ahead.
You go. It's fine.
No. No, I'm done. I just wanted to say performance. That's it.
All right. We'll spend some time on performance then. Let's go.
No. You can continue. I just, and point 3, performance.
I've legit forgotten what I was gonna say. Let's talk about performance.
No. I'm so sorry, Pie. I'm so sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah. I'm just saying all those mobs alive at one time. Performance. Performance issues. It becomes a problem. Particle effects and such.
Mm. Who's rocking Vulcan at the moment?
I can't.
I am.
How's it going for you, Kit? I cannot.
Yeah, I can't.
What's interesting is that it was better last league in beta, and then I've had a couple like blips, but also I recently upgraded my PC, so I didn't have issues with either anymore. So no, I don't notice anything too different. I think my beefy PC is just like, I can do it.
I could do it.
Any of it.
Give it me good.
I mean, I don't know, maybe it's
I'm sorry I said that. I meant in like a fight kind of way.
Something good.
Yeah, totally a fight way.
I just watched Buffy. It's one of the lines, and one of the characters says it. Okay. Also, the rant about like the definition of harbingers, yeah, makes me think of Buffy a little bit because I've just finished watching that. Anyway, let's move on to an interesting topic. Okay, we kind of already covered going core, but like maybe I want to spend a little bit of time on like Delirium going core, and not the classical thing yet, but yes. What I'm curious about is, are you encountering Delirium mirrors like as much as we thought we would when we heard about it, or is it less or more? Do you have a lot of Delirium orbs in your stash tab that you're ready to use? Because like I was kind of just like, hey, I'm probably not gonna buy a Delirium stash tab specifically because I don't have any Delirium currency. Go. Take away floor.
So I ended up playing this league a bit less than I have other ones, just due to a multitude of factors. Nothing, like bad or anything, but during normal stream time, and that's pretty much what I've played. And my progression certainly wasn't as fast as it normally was because I just got completely entrapped by this idea of making the bleed miner, and that took like a little bit of time to kick up off the ground so that I could take over the progression from my league starter as far as like filling in the atlas, etc., etc. But where I'm at now, I have a whopping 3 Delirium orbs and 277 splinters.
Amazing.
I mean, like, I don't mean to brag or anything, but I'm pretty much in it. But in all seriousness, no, I feel like the implementation on an ideal sort of basis was great. Like, I kind of like the idea that it's a little bit more rare, but then it sort of plays off of the idea of what it was meant to do in the first place, was to augment all the other league mechanics that are available to you. And I like that. Like, that's, it's not exactly how I kind of thought that they would implement it, but I thought it was a neat solution. Until where you run 8 juiced maps with sextants and 4 scarabs in a row and you don't see one. And then you're like, okay, well, what the hell is this? And then furthermore, I feel like if they're going to make it like this respectively rare, they should have taken the time to properly fix the fog in the different maps or it doesn't work as well. I'm not saying like give everyone like the perfect fog dispersal pattern to make it every single one of them just rain fragments on you and cluster jewels and all that other kind of stuff, but there are some maps that are known to have these like pretty massive problems with the way the delirium fog behaves. So like correspondingly, if the mirror just happens to show up on one of those maps, it's like it didn't show up at all because you're going to get at best like 4 layers of rewards rather than 5, 6, 7, or 8, depending on like how fast you can complete your map and how good your build is, etc. And then like, you clear it all and you're stressing out, but you haven't moved very much because the algorithm is based on how much you move and you're like, cool, I got 5 level of rewards. I worked my ass off and it's like 1 splinter. And you're like, "Oh my god, what the hell?" So, I feel like the implementation as far as the way the mechanic was introduced to how, like, we would be encountering it was a great idea. I think in execution, they need to clean up some of the mechanics a little bit to, like, then support it, because if it's going to be respectively that rare, then they need to go back and kind of fix some of the problems that we encountered in the league itself.
I had a situation in a Colosseum map. Delirium was right there. I hit it. I run forward. I get stuck in a little arena. Delirium's gone.
No, no.
Just
Those dang chickens
okay.
sabotage you like that.
Yeah, like immediately, literally, it was my first enemy wave was an arena, and it was, and I didn't see it before I hit the delirium. So I hit the delirium, run, oh, that was it.
Yeah.
Forget calls.
Been there.
I feel like that idea of more rewards for distance kind of in Delirium when it's every map, but now with so many different maps and so many different shape maps where you have ones where you have to go through doors, ones that are just more round, instead of it doesn't make a lot of sense. And BK, I have 2 Delirium orbs, so I am also part of the 1%.
Yeah, one in it.
Yeah, we're just
women.
rolling in it. I remember I was trying to spawn them, and I did something similar. I think I only did like 4 maps where I had full, scarabs. They were chiseled. I put one of the master missions, paid for like breach or harbinger. I didn't get any, and then like after a couple, I think 1 or 2 maps that I just alked, I got a delirium mirror. It's like I don't understand. I feel like they said if you put more stuff on it, it's going to be more likely to appear. But from personal experience, and I did see a Reddit thread where someone was actually doing a analysis of the spawn rate, and it seems it's true technically that you will get more delirium mirrors with higher juice. But in my experience, they always show up on the ones that I don't juice. Dang it!
66% quant.
Feels bad, man.
Or like that blue guardian map because you're just not sure if your build's tanky enough. You're just like, yeah, just make it blue. And delirium have 23% quantity.
Yeah, seriously. And you're like, great. It feels wasteful.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't pick it, it's just still, it's like, I don't know. It's just my experience, but I wish it was higher weight. Because if you're going to throw a bunch of currency, just try to get delirium. I'd like to see it more often. And less often in ones you don't choose.
The way that I had initially kind of hoped that they would implement it was that the delirium orbs would drop sort of like horizon orbs. That they would just sort of be this baseline thing that existed, and then you could choose, if you set up on a 5-track for a certain conqueror and you knew you were going to have the super juice maps at these certain times, then you could, theoretically like super juice the way that the entire mechanic was intended, but then you could also choose like when you would be involved with it, and then with the way the reward scale, when you have percent delirium in your map versus the mere delirium, you're guaranteed to have the splinters and everything else a little bit more commonly and often. So I thought like that would have been a good way. And I was honestly excited a little bit, I was disappointed, but also excited about this current implementation. But I think it just needs some tweaking on the back end for sure. And some, I guess, reevaluation of the mechanic.
I think I still would have been really happy with Delirium mobs just dropping, sporadically, or even like, oh god, I was gonna say shards of them, and then I know that there would have been lots of mold. But because like having like a whole one drop, because I don't even know how to say why I would want that. Maybe I'll take it back. Moving right along. Do we want to talk about class sigils?
Do you guys
still on
do you
this
guys
one?
feel like Delirium? Now, I don't know if Delirium just spoiled me with density, but I feel like density since Delirium has been disappointing. just
Like a Delirium mirror now.
Delirium mirror now.
Less dense in the map once you started it.
No, I just mean maps period since Delirium's been gone feels like I did a burial chambers, and in the middle section, I'm not kidding, I got 3 packs of mobs in the entire middle inside section. And I'm like, I had sextons on the map. It was relatively juice, relatively. And it was just like, I know that burial chambers is not the best showing because it's so popular, it doesn't have the best density, etc. But in this case, it just feels like there was a change to density for Delirium, and then it wasn't a change back. Now I could be crazy, but it's like it's one of those gut feelings, I feel it in my gut.
That would make sense, though. I mean, I was gonna say it could just be perception, but if there's going to be Delirium in everything, they would want to have less base density because it's going to be filled with Delirium monsters.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm just not getting the same murder satisfaction.
Want to kill lots of monsters.
It's an action RPG after all. Me smash mini monster.
That's why I play the game, man. Fell smash. I just want to kill things and see periodic loot drop and hear a shing every once in a while, and then find out it's something disappointing.
Oh lord,
like one of those sad uniques, that used to be good last league, but now it's all sad and nerfed, and you're like, oh, that's worth nothing.
Yeah.
Or it's just got the same base as some chase, and you're like, ooh, is that? Oh,
no, it's Tinkerskin.
Yeah. Mostly the belt thing, because like the default, if you don't customize your filter and everything, it's always the belt, and I'm always like, but it's never gonna be that belt. Like, I've accepted that. I have no interest in that belt even, but it's always a different color and it's big and it's like a thing, and I'm just like, yeah, I was really just too lazy to redo my item filter this time, and I don't want to know about this belt.
Nemesis doesn't even exist. You're still like, no.
Yeah. Okay, what about 300 splinters? Do we think this 300 splinter number is good? I remember when it was introduced last league, I was like, why don't you just make them drop less and still make them be 100 splinters? Like, lots of splinters is annoying.
I think 300 is fine. I think 300 would be fine if the correlation of how the splinters drop, like if you can get, like, I don't know what the average is, like something like Tropical Island is always going to be like the extreme where you can get like absolute boatloads of splinters out of certain maps and not others. But like if they fixed that sort of divergence in like how they are rewarded, I think 300 could be fine. Like I don't see a problem with 300 being like too much or too little, because proportionally speaking, like they are significantly more powerful reward-wise and otherwise than a breachstone is. So I think the correlating number being more than something like a breachstone or an emblem that we've seen in the past, I think it's fine because emblems then, you have to use multiple of them, so they're gated that way. But since simulacrum is a one time, like a one key entry sort of thing, 300 is fine. I just, consistency in how the splinters drop would be what needs to happen to make it feel a little bit better.
I think if there was a better, I know that they tried to make it so that you juice the map, you get a Delirium mirror more likely, but I don't feel like that's weighted enough. And so I think that if there was, you're going to sink more currency in to have these Deliriums, and then you have a better chance of getting more splinters or Delirium orbs to make, a guaranteed map where you can know, like, you use a Delirium orb on your tropical island, you're going to get a lot of splinters. But I think that because you can get it on a map like Colosseum that just completely screws you over, and you get one splinter maybe, I wish there was a way to kind of have more control if you're searching for splinters to get more at a time. Because since you can't really guarantee a Delirium in any meaningful way, like you could be getting 1 to 2 splinters at a time if you're just having bad luck on where they're popping. I don't really know how they would fix that, but maybe like fixing what determines how many splinters you get instead of it being distance.
I feel like distance doesn't even necessarily count because even in Delirium, I have ran the same maps with same juice with different splinter outcome, even though I made it the same distance. You know what I mean?
I've noticed that too. Yeah, I've run, even last league, there'd be maps where I'd do the exact same thing, and I felt like I was getting very different numbers. Like sometimes I get 10 and sometimes I get 36. Okay?
Yeah.
Why? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, the whole Delirium experience has been pretty light. Like, I'll run into it and my build's not good enough for it, so I have 5 splinters, and I don't think my opinion counts, but at the same time, does it? Because I seem to be reflecting that of the casual player.
Absolutely, it counts. I mean, come on, you play this game enough. You feel like you should be finding more than 5 splinters. I mean, you probably should. Even if your build's not like good enough to run it to the end or whatever, you should maybe get a couple off of clearing some of the mobs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lackluster show for me. Do we want let's just have a little glance at cluster jewels. I know Noodle has a rant on this one.
Deep cuts. Go on.
I'm just really annoyed that they would introduce something that's so huge and is definitely, in my opinion, not a league mechanic. It's a change to the skill tree itself. And we see that every league. There's almost always some kind of change to the skill tree. And this was huge. It was a giant change. It's like you can potentially, make completely different builds, not even using the standard, outline for trees that most builds, even if they're a little different, they sort of have a similar outline. And so you're going to introduce this thing, and then you're going to say, oh, well, these changes to the skill tree, for some reason, that's a league mechanic, even though there's absolutely no more tie between these cluster jewels and Delirium. There's nothing there. And then not only that, you've introduced so many new nodes that when it comes to patch notes, you can't even tell me all the changes you made. I have to find out when I start my build and get the node that you changed one of them to make it so that I don't get extra Sentinels of Purity. Really? It's like, you're going to make all these changes, but you can't even tell us? Why did you even introduce such a crazy expansion to the tree if you're going to say, oh yeah, that's the same as like bestiary stuff? It's not.
I have to agree, but I ranted about this from the beginning. Like, I've been annoyed about this from the beginning.
Rant again?
No,
Do it again.
It's okay.
Go on.
I think
Tell
you
us
said everything that I Okay, so the thing that really concerns me, and I think I might have mentioned this in the previous episode, but like when Chris was on his interview with Ziggy and he said, someone in the office stopped me because I was against this, and they said, but this is an item that is unique to Delirium. And I've had a conversation with a GGG dev where they said the reason that we didn't make the change to the map device is because thematically, lore-wise, it didn't make sense. And I'm like, these are two wildly inconsistent opinions to hold from the same company. And it makes me worry because, like, when we talk about how do we implement Harvest going core, how do we talk about future leagues going core, and any other introduced mechanics and stuff, you know, it's always like, okay, the lore is what matters here. It has to make sense in the story for it to exist in the game. This is not in the story anywhere at all. It's not in the story. Yeah. But also the other thing is, I just, even like, they're not part of build design. Like, it didn't get balanced to me. Like, last league, nearly every build had at least one, if not two, cluster jewel setups, and then you know, go to your special ones which had uniques and purposeful harbinger stuff. That's sort of like been totally canned, and I understand that, because it was too powerful, but at the same time you still kind of want these things to work and you still want people to engage with them. But honestly, like, when we plan build trees, I don't plan to have like my perfect cluster jewel setup in my build tree. I mean, if I was playing in a trade league and I could get exactly what I wanted, and the crafting system, I guess, works all right because you've got harvest crafting that you can use to like engage with cluster jewels to get slightly more desired outcomes. But at the same time, the cluster jewels themselves already say like exactly what kind of stuff you can roll on them. So like, how much does deterministic crafting help there? Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like this league kind of fucked cluster jewels really badly, and I'm sad because, you know, we want to build variety, and this game is in a good spot. There's a lot of stuff that's viable and strong even without harvest crafting, and then add harvest crafting in. But I just thought cluster jewels brought a lot more variety to the table.
Yeah, that's why I really enjoyed them, is because it introduced like a whole new facet of build variety. And I could see saying that some of the unique jewels are Delirium related, right? Like voices, you know, hollow palm, fine, but just cluster jewels in themselves, I feel like, are just jewels.
Yep.
I feel like I'm at the opposite mind with that, because I feel that not only I think that some cluster jewels or cluster notables were hit pretty hard, and definitely there's a lot going on, and it makes a lot of uncertainty with our builds. But I also feel that like I'm using a certain cluster jewel for my ground slam. It's really good, but I could use 3 other different notables, or like 2 like there's a lot of variety there, and I feel that they can take a mediocre skill and give it a few fun ways to play it, instead of like certain the skills just being completely off the table. Lightning strike, I'm looking at you. You know? Lightning strike without savior, let's say. Yeah, you know, it's just not very appealing. But with cluster boys, you know, and different types of ones, because you can go elemental damage, you can go with the you know, it's more lightning specific. Like, there's a lot of variety there, so I don't feel like I'm shoehorned in. And like, is there an ideal cluster jewel? Sometimes, and sometimes with fossil crafting you can get it. Like my aura clusters, you just need bound fossils to try to roll on those nodes, right? It just takes a lot of looking up at PoE and seeing if I can if it even has a tag, and if I can work it, and if it hasn't changed or not, you know. There's some things like that. It could be clearer, but I still think that, like, I don't feel like I'm shoehorned in, and I don't feel like they were, other than a few specific notables, like, I don't think they were nerfed too dramatically, kind of thing. I feel like they offer me a lot of variety in skill and notable.
Could we just thought that really only viable in Trade League? Or really only
I
viable
don't.
because of harvest crafting or something like that, but it just seems like
If it doesn't have a tag, like if what you want doesn't have a tag and you can't like make it with fossils or something, yeah, good luck spending the alts on that, right? Especially
Yeah.
if you need 3 notables. The greatest thing they did was add the jewel socket as an implicit or whatever, because before that, forget it. Forget it.
BK, what you
That
think?
was
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just asking BK what she thought of cluster jewels.
I think overall I really like them. I feel like certain skills and classes kind of got shafted in their initial implementation, and then furthermore in some of the affix culling or notable culling as far as them removing certain ones. So while not a perfect implementation or representative of a lot of the things that I would have liked to have seen, specifically like more generic minion stuff rather than things that cater to the top 3, because I'm a huge proponent of SRS. So, the fact that there's like all this stuff for specters and skellies and zombies is kind of like, what about our little guys? Come on. So like overall, yes, I do like them. I think they add a lot to the game. I like the fact that you can sort of like fix a lot of the issues with certain builds, like Shadow not having enough life. Well, you can hang a couple of cluster jewels out there with Fettle and make sure that he's got 180 to 220% life if you want to, without having to travel all the way through the Witch area to Timbuktu down into like the Marauder, or not the Marauder area, but over into like Templar and stuff too. Like the Shadow trees without clusters that hit 200 life are the most ridiculous things that I've ever seen. So it's really nice that clusters kind of allow for that to be scaled back and put into a little bit more like build customization, I suppose. But I kind of wish they were a little bit more representative as a whole.
Lots of vigorous nodding. Do you want to very briefly touch on our final topic of this podcast?
Sure.
Okay, so I have not researched this because I'm not American, but Trump's executive order against Tencent. I did see that there's been an update posted, so Tencent won't, like anything owned by Tencent won't be affected. It's specifically because they're trying to target the Wechat client from China. But yeah, what did you guys think of Trump's executive order? Because I know it's going to affect at least 2 of you.
Well, I think both the idea that everything Tencent is a parent company of being like no longer in America, but also saying that it's only affecting WeChat and TikTok are not quite correct, because in the language of the executive order it says WeChat and Tencent and any subsidiary is related to that as determined by some person. I forget what the title is, and that person will say what subsidiaries of Tencent are affected in 45 days. So honestly, we really don't know. It's probably not going, I think it would be really stupid to just be like all of, when there's clearly a target here for WeChat and TikTok, but it is certainly a little more open than I am comfortable with. But we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. I think it's...
I wonder if that turns into a big firewall? Like you just can't access the game, or are you China now?
I don't really know how it would work because it's related to transactions, at least in that document. So I have no idea, like, what it would look like if there was any consequences related to GGG. Because I guess it's not like they're going to be like, oh yeah, you can play the game, but you don't have to pay for anything. Or you can't pay for anything,
Yeah, I mean, it's a free-to-play game, but you still kind of have those transactions with like MTX and stash tabs and whatnot. Supporter packs.
I guess my problem with the executive order too is more or less that if like the targets are WeChat and TikTok, there are platforms which those are solely run through and accessible that can be policed or have them removed from it or have certain like expectations of, you know, getting rid of some of like the user surveillance or other like parts of the like nefarious parts of these applications that people are using. But it pretty much is and concerns phones and phone applications and that sort of thing. Like to take the entire pot shot at Tencent, not saying that they're this poor little baby company that needs protecting or anything like that, but I feel like if the concern was really based on those two things and not some sort of like big blow up show of going after like the entire company, then I feel like it could have been handled a lot more directly. Like if the problem are these applications and the privacy concerns involved with these applications, then go after those applications.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, I think that's the idea, right? Is that if it was as targeted as some people are interpreting it as, then it would be just that. It would be about the companies. It wouldn't be about Tencent and its subsidiaries. I think they're leaving it open on purpose to either be like scary to China or just to have kind of the freedom to decide as they go along, which leaves everyone else kind of like, okay, it's pretty vague because, right, subsidiaries in general means, you know, Tencent is a parent company of a place, but there's a lot of different types of relationships, right? Like they could outright own something, they could have stocks in something, they could have, you know, stocks without any input, like with GGG. So they're just leaving it open ended, and I don't think that that indicates to us that they're actually just focused on WeChat and TikTok. That's what they're saying.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think they know what they're focused on, honestly.
Yeah.
I just think it's a fucking mess, dude. It's just a mess.
Yeah. That's
And
a good
I
way to
don't think
describe all of it.
Yeah, it's just a big mess. I don't think it's gonna affect our game. I think I think Devin and Slasher both said that it's not gonna affect our games in particular. Just WeChat and Tencent as a whole. Not like, yeah. I don't think Blizzard or anybody will be affected. Can't remember exactly the post though. But yeah, it's just what a shit show, dude. What a mess. Oh man. You know,
Unfortunately,
2020.
we have to wait those 45 days, or, you know, that's the deadline for when they'll be more clear about what they mean by WeChat and Tencent subsidiaries, because that's like,
very, very vague.
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you can say the subsidiaries as we decide them later
Yep.
in 45 days.
Yep. I think on that really lovely note, we might wrap up the podcast. I think it's been really lovely talking to you guys about all the different things happening in Path of Exile, and I can't wait to catch up again. Until then, been piebypie, KittenCatNoodle, Brittleknee, Velyna. We've all been chatting PoE stuff, and we'll be back again very soon. Announcement TBD. Bye.